Welcome back to the Pursuit Zone. This is episode 199 with Radu Păltineanu, where we talk about his cycling adventure from Alaska to Argentina, which included a boat journey up the Amazon River. My name is Paul Schmid. I'm the host of this podcast, and I interview explorers from around the globe to bring you their exciting stories. These are people that dream big, break out of their comfort zones, and take on ambitious pursuits. Let's start the show, and let me introduce my guest. At age 15, he emigrated with his parents from Romania to Montreal, Canada. He studied software engineering at university, but after graduation, he decided to take another path in life. He left on a 9-month adventure to cycle the Americas, from the top of Alaska to the bottom of South America, a 34,000-kilometer journey that ultimately lasted more than 3 years. For this, he was awarded the European Adventurer of the Year in 2018. You can learn more at his website, radupaltineanu.com. Radu Păltineanu, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Hey, thanks.
Where did you grow up in Romania?
I grew up in a provincial town of about 100,000 inhabitants. It's called Piatra Neamț, and I think it was the perfect setup to grow up in because I had the mountains close by. I remember every summer my grandfather would take me for hikes around the city, like short ones, maybe 2-3 hours, 4 hours. And growing up in that area, I think made me feel close to nature, made me feel part of nature, you know? So then going to Canada at age 15 and living in a big city like Montreal, it was a completely different thing, you know, like coming from that small town in Romania where I grew up close to nature, then moving into a big city like Montreal where, you know, it's cars everywhere, noises everywhere. I never quite feel part of it, you know, even though it was quite an amazing experience to move there and I learned so much from it, you know. Then, you know, going into studying at McGill University was quite a nice experience as well because you have so many people from all over the world and you learn so many things. But for me, growing up in that area, growing up in that city called Piatra Neamț was my first introduction to adventure. Was close to nature, beautiful, small hometown, and yeah, I think that's where my sense of adventure, my thirst of it comes from. When at age 10, actually at age 11, I learned that I could take the train and go to neighboring cities like Bacău, which was 60 kilometers away from my hometown, Piatra Neamț. And, you know, like pushing those boundaries was always something that I did, you know, like I first pushed the boundaries of my city, then I pushed the boundaries of my country, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where you start building up this thirst of doing bigger things and going into bigger adventures and feeling like doing it, you know.
When you went to Canada at age 15, did you already speak English?
Yeah, I mean, my English was pretty bad, but English was not that useful in the area where I immigrated to Canada because I immigrated in the French part of it. So for the first year there, I had to learn French because as an immigrant in Quebec, you're not allowed to go to an English-speaking school. They have a very protectionist system where they want new incoming immigrants to speak French and to be integrated into the French system, you know, of that part of Canada. My English was quite decent, but not really useful if I wanted to go to school in Quebec, in Montreal. So I had to learn French. But that was quite a new experience. Now, looking back at it, it was amazing that I did it because I'm able to speak another language and they got integrated into French culture as well. So I think even though sometimes we do not see those things happening to us in a positive light, later on I always look back at them with as experiences, you know? Everything we go through in life is an experience. So
I think a lot of people at that age, when they're about to graduate from university, their thoughts are to getting a job and making money. But that's not what your thoughts were. How did you get onto this idea of wanting to go on a big cycling adventure?
up till 2015, I've been spending my summers doing different kind of adventures on a smaller scale, but I was always doing something during the summer. From 2010 till 2015, I would get into, I don't know, shorter cycling expeditions. Like in 2013, I went from Copenhagen to St. Petersburg in Russia, and then down to Crimea by bike, advocating for an NGO in Romania, which was opposing a mining project in the Carpathian Mountains. So I did it for a purpose as well back then. I would sometimes hitchhike. In 2014, I went hitchhiking from Romania to France, then went down in the southern part of the country, then to Italy, and then onwards to the Balkan countries, all the way to Iran, to Tehran, where I climbed the volcano. So I've been building up with all these shorter adventures till the moment when I decided to actually go on for as long as I don't know, it would take me to do something bigger like the Americas, you know.
Your parents, of course, are probably, thrilled that you're going to graduate from this university with this degree. And then you decide you have to tell them, no, I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to go on this adventure. What is their reaction? What do they say?
Oh, my parents come from a very conservative environment, you know. They're churchgoers, and they didn't like it at all. They were disappointed by my decision. I gotta put it this way, you know. And my mom was scared to death that a wild animal would harm me, or, you know, like, as I was going down my route through Latin America, she was scared to death that somebody would harm me, you know, or would rob me or would kill me. So it was both a deception in the fact that for them that I didn't pursue a career in software engineering in, I don't know, Toronto, Seattle, or I don't know, San Francisco in the Silicon Valley. But, you know, back in 2015, when I look back at it, you know, it's all about being sincere with yourselves. Like, what do you really want to do in this life, you know? Do you want to do something just because your parents tell you to? Or just because you feel pressured from your peers, from your environment, from the society to do it? Or you want to listen to yourself and get into something that it's really exciting for you, even though you don't know about what's going to come along the way. But this is the excitement, actually. You know, the fact that you don't know what is it all about, the fact that you don't know who you're gonna meet, what situations are you gonna be in, what new places are you gonna pass through. This is what drove me towards a life of adventure instead of a 9-to-5 job in a corporation. And this is why I got, you know, I listened to myself back in 2015. Okay, look, Radu, what do you want to do? You want to apply for jobs and get a job in a corporation because everybody tells you to? All your colleagues at McGill University are applying for jobs and you're not, you know? Like, it's that kind of a pressure. But no, then I took that leap of faith, I would call it, to go into an area which I was excited to go towards. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know much. How would I manage to basically live with that? I don't know. There's so many questions that arise from moving from, you know, like a society, from the, like, instead of having a regular job, a regular house, a regular everything like everybody else, going into, a full-time adventure that is where uncertainty is the rule,
Right. So you made the decision to follow your interests rather than to follow the status.
I follow my intrinsic values rather than following the extrinsic pressures.
How much time before you left on the adventure? How much time did you put into planning it?
So look, I took the decision to do it I remember very well the day I took that decision. It was in February of 2015. So I had another 3 months till graduation. So I focused on getting all my courses done, graduating, and then that was pretty much it. I had another 2 months to go. There wasn't so much preparation before it. I mean, I would cycle every day, and that kind of stuff, but I'm not a cyclist, I'm an adventurer. So an adventurer doesn't look for performance, or doesn't look to perform in any way. He looks for the thrill of new experiences and new places and that kind of stuff. So there wasn't that much preparation, but I remember graduating in May of 2015, and then the remaining 2 months and a half I dedicated to preparing this adventure full time. I mean, I had to get a bike. I had to, I wanted to have a website where I could share my experience with people, a Facebook page, that kind of stuff, And I also wanted to do a documentary about it and film my adventures. So I needed these small things like cameras, a bike, not that much, There's not that much infrastructure when you plan to live on a bike. People think, oh wow, you need so much time and so much energy to put into it before doing it. But I think you can just do it. I'm that kind of person that kind of adventurer who thinks, man, you can just do things. Because if you think too much about it, there's all sorts of adventures out there and all sorts of mentalities. But I think if you really think too much about something, if you start getting afraid of it, you start getting so many questions that you end up not doing it. So I'm rather that type of person who thinks, okay, if I have the minimum necessary, I'm doing it, So that was the case for the Americas as well, for my bike tour across the 2 Americas. Tell
me about your bike and how you had it set up.
Well, first of all, I gotta mention the fact that a friend from Romania, he put me in touch with the bike company from there, whose bikes are imported from Bulgaria, the neighboring country. It's called Cross Bike, and they were amazed by what I wanted to do, and they were like, yeah, sure. So we're gonna sponsor you with a bike and the everything else needed for your journey. So they ordered me a butterfly handlebar. I recommend that to anybody doing touring cycling. I had the 4 regular panniers, like 2 in front and 2 in the back. Yeah, so nothing really special, like the general Ortlieb panniers. But I didn't have Ortlieb, I have MSX, which is just like Ortlieb. They're Germans. They're as good. It's a good alternative. And pretty much a regular bike. I don't know, like it was a 28-inch wheel bike. Some people love the 20s in the touring, in the touring cycling world. A lot of people use the 26-inch one. This is the regular one for touring. But I do love the 28 because it's just so much more comfortable. I don't know. Probably when you go off-road, you better have the 26 one, but the 28 one is just so comfortable. And in my journey, I had pretty much 75% asphalt and just 25% off-road, or even less. Yeah, it's a good trade, I love my 28-inch wheel bike. As equipment, I had 4-season sleeping bag with me, 3-season tent, and clothes for 4 seasons, basically, going down from 70 degrees northern latitude all the way to 55 degrees of latitude south, you pretty much go through every single climate possible except the polar one. I was prepared for 4 seasons all the way through. Even though they robbed me later on in Panama, they robbed all my clothes, but we'll get there.
How did you get up to the starting point?
So, this guy, a friend of mine, Iwan Roman, I mean, he's like a news reporter for a TV station in Romania. So he got onto my story after I posted what I wanted to do on my Facebook page. I pretty much in February, February 2015, I decided to do it, and then I posted that idea on Facebook. I was like, okay, I want to cycle the length of the Americas from Alaska to Argentina. So he got onto my story, and he was the one who came up with the idea. Okay, so why not filming it? Why not doing a documentary about your trip? So I was like, yeah, sure. And he pretty much came with me all the way to Alaska. He split the coasts with 2 other friends of his that wanted to see those, barren, remote places that not a lot of people get to see, like the Alaskan tundra. And it's so far away from everything and anything, that just attracts people for this wilderness, for this remoteness, So they split the coasts, and he came with me, and they gave me a ride all the way to that horse. We basically flew together from Montreal to a small town in Alberta, Canada, called Grande Prairie, where we rented a car together. So it took us about 5 days driving all the way from Grande Prairie to that horse, 3,300 kilometers in that car. We figured out it was cheaper to fly to Grande Prairie and then rent the car from there. And that way they were able to see many things along the way as well. And I remember on the 3rd of August, they dropped me in that horse, Alaska, and then they left the same day. And this is the moment when you realize that, holy it's actually happening. You don't realize it all along, as well as you do on the day you get dropped there, and then you're alone with your bike and you gotta start pedal south, But of course, this friend of mine, he was filming stuff along the way. He filmed me the day we were there together in that horse and the moment they left and stuff like that. And then I kept on sending him videos of me along the way. I pretty much filmed myself along the way. There was nobody there any longer after that first episode of them leaving me there.
That time that you spent cycling down through Alaska and down through Canada, what do you remember about it?
I even remember the first day, the idea was to cycle 24,000 kilometers. That's the amount of kilometers I calculated my route to be from that horse, Alaska, to Ushuaia, Argentina. So I remember the first day, I cycled about 55 kilometers. And I left it was like 5 p.m., but time there doesn't make sense in August because you have 24 hours of daylight. It's pretty late, at 5 p.m. But I do remember that I cycled about 55 kilometers during the first day. And when I stopped, I was like, I have another 23,945 kilometers to go. Am I really gonna be able to cycle all this distance? It's one thing to see it on paper. It's one thing to see it on Google Earth. But it's a completely different feeling when you actually get on your bike and you realize that you have to cycle 24,000 kilometers. It's a wow moment. It's like, what did I get myself into? But then I realized if I were able to split this project into smaller ones, if I were able to think in terms of Fairbanks instead of Ushuaia. If I were able to think in terms of, Edmonton, Salt Lake City, then the project would be much easier. So told myself, look, Radu, you don't have to cycle 23,955 additional kilometers. You only need to cycle your distance remaining to Fairbanks, Alaska. If you do that, and you'll see about the rest. That kept me motivated. As human beings, I think we need tangible targets, We love that. It's much easier to think in terms of like tangible things. It's a lot easier to get motivated to get there. And that's how you build bigger projects. That's how you build larger expeditions and crazier ones, Just like you build anything else in life, Small steps, one small step at a time. Yeah, and what I remember from that period is that I was in a race against winter. I left Alaska on the 5th of August, 2 days after those guys dropped me there, and it was quite a race against winter time. Usually, cyclists they leave in June from Alaska. The ones doing that Pan American journey, they usually leave in June. I was there in beginning of August, so that was like 2 months later than everybody else does it usually. I was literally in a race with the winter up till reaching Mexico. And I was lucky enough not to get hit by it fully up until I reached Montana. Because, going from that horse to the States, you have to cycle the Dalton Highway, which is one of the most remote roads in the United States. Then you go down the Alaska Highway, which is, I don't know in miles, I know in kilometers, it's like about 2,200 kilometers. I'm really bad with miles. Actually, when I was cycling in the US, I was like cursing the miles every other day. Because, it's just an American thing, calculating distances in miles. So everybody else in the world does it in kilometers. Even Canada does it in kilometers. So that's why I don't even know what the distance would be in miles. But in kilometers, about 2,200 kilometers of Alaska Highway that goes through really like nowhere. It's a road in the middle of nowhere. It's a road in the middle of the boreal forest of Alaska and Canada. And yeah, so the most pregnant thing that I remember from that period is that race against wintertime, but also the beauty of this wild land, the rock terrain, I don't know, it's just you and the nature there. I would camp along the way. Sometimes I would get to that point on the map, which appears to be a village. Is not really a village. It's basically a gas station or a house inhabited by at most 2 people. So, welcome to Canada. Welcome to Alaska. This is it. Whatever appears to be a village on the map is actually 2 people calling that place something, But I was impressed by Alaska Highway also from the human point of view. Those points on the map would always tell the story. I remember some people, when you cycle for a full day, I don't know, you cycle 100, 120 kilometers a day, maybe less, maybe more. You try to go from one of these points to the next because there's nothing in between, right? So you still try to get some food, some coffee, I don't know. Whenever I would get to one of these points, I would meet a different human character. Being so remote and so far away from everything else, up there, you see the human character at its most sincere state. So sometimes I'll get to a place where people will just welcome me, be like, wow, you came all the way from that horse, Alaska. Just grab a free coffee and, have a, some people would have motels next to the gas station and they would offer me a free accommodation, Some other times you'd also meet the greedy type of human being, who'd always want to charge you for the tiniest thing, just just entering the place, you'll get charged, So this is what I remember about Alaska highways, like meeting all these human characters. I think people moving up there, they either do it because they're just nice people wanting to be close to nature, wanting to be their most sincere state of human existence, or they just live the world because they're too greedy and not fitting anywhere else.
Well, eventually you make your way down through the U.S. and you enter Mexico. This is where you spend 3 months in Mexico. One of the things that you're also doing is you had started this seven
volcanic summits.
Yeah, the 7 volcanic summits project. So here in Mexico, you have a chance to do Orizaba. What do you remember about your time spent in Mexico? What do you like about Mexico?
Oh, I love Mexico. I'm actually proud of having seen the cream of Mexico, the best, the non-touristic Mexico, because many people, when they say Mexico, they say Cancun, they say, Rivera Maya and Yucatan. That is not Mexico. That is not the Mexico I've seen and I've experienced. So for 3 months, from January of 2016 till April of 2016, I cycled the entire length of Mexico from Ciudad Juarez. Yeah, so by the way, I entered Mexico in Ciudad Juarez, and everybody going down through the United States warned me against not entering Mexico through Juarez, being known as one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And I'm that kind of adventurer and that kind of a person. So if everybody warns me not to do something, I get so stubborn and I actually do it, I actually do that thing that people warn me not to do, I entered Mexico in Juarez, and I remember spending a week there with a person that I met at the border, a girl, Leslie. She was a resident of Juarez, and she showed me the real, Juarez. And I heard all the stories from her father being basically executed in front of her house when she was a kid, and how everybody's somehow linked to the drugs world, to the drug cartels there, and everybody's dragged into it, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes involuntarily. It was such a discrepancy, such a big change going from the United States into Mexico. Everything changes. The language changes. The way people build their houses changes. The way everything is done changes. And it was the first country where I've seen a market where people go out every day, and it was more like Romania, because Romania is a Latin country as well. It's the only Eastern European country which speaks a Romance language. So, when I entered Mexico, I started feeling more like home, The language is almost the same, Spanish is so close to Romanian. And yeah, it was amazing being Mexico, even though I entered the country through its most dangerous point. And then I cycled the Chihuahua Desert into Chihuahua City, then Zacatecas, Querétaro, Ciudad de Mexico, and all the way down to the Guatemalese border, where I've met all those groups of illegal immigrants making their way to the United States, And I heard the stories firsthand, You see those stories on the news, but it's one thing to read about them and to be disconnected from them. It's something completely different to actually meet and see this phenomena with your own eyes and talk to those guys. Some of them were barefooted, they didn't have anything, and they would try to make their own way from Honduras all the way to the United States. And this is another aspect which I find amazing about this bike journey from Alaska to Argentina, is that you see there were so many things along the way. It's not just about getting from point A to point B, but it's about having those experiences. It's about getting to know the world and seeing those phenomena that we hear so much on the TV, I find this amazing. This is one of the reasons I try to see the world on a bike, because, in a car, you don't pay that much attention to whatever is going on around you. You don't see these places. You don't get to meet those people. But on a bike, hey, you are out there all the time, you know? You get yourself in trouble, but I wanted trouble, you know? I wanted to see those things. I wanted to learn and to experience the world as is, you know? One of the other things is that people ask me, why would you go into countries considered dangerous? Well, because my idea is to see the world as is. And if I skip those countries, I do not get to see those phenomena firsthand. I mean, I do skip part of what humanity is all about, you know? I do get to skip aspects of human condition, of human ways of organizing, you know, political regimes and stuff like that, you know? So,
what was your favorite food in Mexico?
Actually, quesadillas. I fell in love with the quesadillas when I was cycling from Juarez to Chihuahua, to Ciudad Chihuahua. There's a small town called Villa Ahumada. This is the quesadillas place. It's just so good. They're so good, man. I'm telling you. After eating whatever I could from the supermarket in the United States, going to Mexico where you have all this street food available, cheap, good, freshly made, you know, it's amazing. It's just amazing. But yeah, my favorite food so far in Mexico is quesadilla. I fell in love with it. It's that like melty, fresh cheese with the taco, and you put on like spicy sauce over it, which I love. It's just amazing.
After Mexico, you're heading down into Central America. You don't write much about it on your blog, other than you kind of sum it up as 7 countries, several thousand kilometers, very hot and humid. What do you remember from going through Central America?
In terms of geography, it's quite a change because up till that point, I've been only through 3 huge countries: Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And when you get to Central America, it's more like Europe. You cross a border every few days. You cross a new border, you know. So that was the first change. But in terms of culture and in terms of experiences, it was as amazing as Mexico. I remember in Guatemala, I deviated from my route to go into the deep jungle of the northern part of Guatemala, of Petén province, to see some Maya ruins. You need about 2 days hike in and 2 days hike out. I took my bike with me, which is not recommended, but I did anyways because I didn't have backpack, so I needed, to carry stuff. So how could I have done it without a bike, you know, where I had the panniers with everything in. So I biked all the way to El Mirador ruins in the deep. It's like so deep in the jungle. I remember being there with a group of Europeans, fellow backpackers, adventurers. There was a guy from Portugal, a girl from Italy, a girl from the Netherlands, another girl from Norway. Anyways, we're a bunch of Europeans there. And the day we finally made it to the site of the ancient Mayan city of El Mirador, we're having coffee in the morning. Well, of course, we're sleeping in tents there. There's a camp where you can pitch your tent. Yeah, so the morning we're supposed to go out and see the ruins. We hear a helicopter coming in. So immediately, the Portuguese guy, he's like, oh man, those guys, if they're coming here by helicopter, they gotta be filthy rich. So, so I was like, yeah, man, I agree, blah, blah, you know. So they land. And they start talking to them. Turns out they were the owners of a multinational company in Colombia called Colombina. Anyways, we made friends, and I was like, "Hey, this is a freaking good opportunity to go back, you know, to not have to do the same itinerary back on my bike because it was difficult coming in, and I wouldn't see anything else new going out because there was no other way out except the way I came in." So I remember we're walking through ruins, and I made it all the way up to the Central Pyramid in El Mirador. And there was this guy Hernando with his brother and his brother's girlfriend and the guide and the helicopter pilot. And I go straight up to him and pretty much ask him like, "Hey man, would you give me a ride back in your helicopter?" And the guy just, yes, yeah, why not, you know? So imagine, it's that kind of experience where, you know, you make your way on a bike all the way to the heart of the Guatemalese jungle, and you see all these beautiful, majestic ruins. Then you buy yourself a ticket on a free ride on a helicopter out of the jungle to a 5-star hotel where you get like fresh beers. And, you know, it's just amazing is that it's for those kind of experience that I want to get into adventures, that I want to get into new places, that I want to do all that. It's when you expect it the least that comes out the best experience. If I were to pay for that helicopter, it wouldn't have been the same experience because I would have expected to receive a service. But when you just dare to ask for something and it comes out positive, I love that, you know. It's just so nice. Yeah, so I got a free ride on a helicopter out of the jungle back to my route, and then made my way to Belize, then back to Guatemala, El Salvador. Took a nice detour on the Pacific coast of El Salvador. Many people told me that the Pacific coast in the United States is really beautiful. Many touring cyclists go through there. I didn't see the Pacific in the United States, but I did get to see it finally in El Salvador. Yeah, then I was for 2 days in Honduras, just cycling 150 kilometers on the Honduran section of the Pan American Highway, and then all the way to Panama. It was so hot. This is some of the hottest places in the world, literally. Like, I really think now that it's much easier to cycle in wintertime, and I do prefer it rather than the tropics. You just get so wasted from the sun and from the heat and from the humidity. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, at the end of July of 2016, almost a year into my trip, I made it to Panama, where I had to take a boat to Colombia because there's no roads linking Panama to Colombia. But I guess you have other questions, so...
Well, yeah, let me just stop and say, first of all, that's a good point that you make about asking. Sometimes all you need to do is ask the question, and then you might get what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other thing I wanted to ask about is, where did your bike go on this helicopter? On the inside of the helicopter?
Okay, so you probably you flew helicopters before, right?
I've never been in a helicopter.
Oh, okay. But it's interesting that you know that it doesn't fit in a helicopter, because I wouldn't know that. So most of the bike fit into the small trunk in the back, except one wheel that the guy Hernando had to keep it in his hands because I was trying to film my way back. So he ended up holding it for me for the 30 minutes ride we took from the jungle all the way to their 5-star hotel, you know. Yeah, but those guys are really, really nice. They were. I'm still keeping in touch with them, and when I got to Colombia, we went out for beers and for dinner. So, you know, it's a nice friendship that we build. But this is, in the end, this is how you meet. This is how you meet people. This is how you make friends along the way. You know, so many people there. I left with 900 Canadian dollars in my pocket. I knew I didn't have the money to complete this journey without the help of the people I would meet along the way, and those reading my blog and you know, and donating money. It was a life adventure for those following me online, and it was an amazing gesture of humanity for those I would meet along the way and would open up their houses, would provide me with shelter and food. And some people even stopped me to give me money along the way. I remember a guy in Utah, a guy on a motorcycle. He stopped me and he offered me $100 after we talked, and wished me best luck on my way south, So when I look back at it, it would have been impossible for me to do it without the help of all these amazing human beings I met along the way, And man, have I met a lot of people, a lot of them, actually. I even, in Uruguay, I even got to, but we'll get there anyways.
Well, yeah, let's talk about, so you got to bridge the Darien Gap. My understanding is that you have to find some boat to get on. So you meet some guys, you pay up front, and then after you pay, you realize, I think these guys are drug smugglers. And at that point, I would be very worried. What happened? What's the story about these guys?
All right. So figure out, even if I would have gone through the Darien Gap, I would have still needed a guy. I would have still needed to pay someone with a boat to get me through some interior rivers in there. So Darien Gap, it's about making your way through deep, luxurious vegetation in the deepest of the jungles, or taking a boat along the shoreline all the way to Colombia, which is what I decided to do. I actually talked to a guy who did it through the Darien Gap, and that's how I knew what it was like to cross the interior of the Darien Gap. So I was like, in the end, you do not, even if you want to say that you cross the Darien Gap, you still need a boat in there. It's still the same thing, So I decided to do it along the shoreline, and meeting one Argentinian, and it was a couple. He was Argentinian, she was Russian. They told me exactly where to go to meet those guys doing the boat trip, the cheapest boat trip from Panama to Colombia. So I left Panama City, made my way to the Caribbean coast on the other side of the mountains, and there I am. I pay the guy. He takes me to an island. It was an island really close to the shore, where I slept the first night. But that's where there was an Israeli guy who came from the other side, from Colombia to Panama, with his motorbike. And I, who was supposed to leave on the same boat back to Colombia, or back to the border between Panama and Colombia, to be precise. And, we're having a beer. We're kind of like making friends with one another. And the guy's supposed to take me on a boat next day. He's like, but I transport people, but I also transport drugs. So I transport some kilos of cocaine to Dominican Republic. I transport some there, some here. I always take some along the way. So it was like, holy shit, And he was joking or not, but he started asking me he started asking the Israeli guy if he could bring some into Israel. And I was like, there's no way. And he started asking me if I could bring some into Romania. I was like, don't you want to expand our market there and stuff like that? So I was like, no, man. But of course, afterwards I had to check my bags because, you never know what's happening along the way. But I figured I was kind of lucky to do it from Panama to Colombia, because usually the drugs go from Colombia to Panama, the other way around. So I was kind of safe in that regard. But it did happen. There were drug traffickers. Just I think 1 in 3 people in that region, they're somehow related to that. It's not a joke. This is not a reality of the region, It's not a joke. It's not a myth. It's a reality,
So you get into Colombia, and I want to fast forward a little bit. So you go through Colombia, Venezuela, and then you go down into the Guianas and eventually down into Brazil, where you you get to the mouth of the Amazon in Macapa, and because your plan is to take a boat up the Amazon, and then after that start cycling again. So when you get to this town of Macapa, tell me about that. What's that town like, and what's it like to try to find a boat to get on to start this boating adventure?
But let me tell you just a few things about Venezuela before, because I think this is an interesting point. Again, just like in the case of northern Mexico and then El Salvador, along the way I would be greeted with people's fears about some places that I would be cycling towards. If in the United States people would warn me against Mexico, against going to cycle the northern part of Mexico. One guy even told me, hey, well, if you make it to northern Mexico, then you run a chance to get all the way to Argentina. It was that kind of a fear, from the part of the people I meet along the way. And then in Mexico, people were me against going to El Salvador. Somebody told me, oh, the moment you step into El Salvador, somebody already sells you and kidnaps you and that kind of stuff, And then in Colombia, everybody warned me against not going to Venezuela. And I was lucky enough to be there around the time when they reopened the border, because the border between Colombia and Venezuela had been by that point closed for a year. And yeah, like Venezuela is not the easiest of the countries. I was actually searched by bandits they came into the hotel I was in, Calabozo, in the center of Venezuela. And I was lucky enough they didn't find me, but they were there, and the next day I got escorted by the Guardias Bolivarianas. Yeah, it was that kind of like an experience in Venezuela. I had to travel with a bag, like literally with a bag full of money, because inflation is the biggest in the world. Yeah, it was quite an experience being there. You see all this, all that situation, and then you go to the Grand Savannah, and it's so beautiful. It's that striking difference between the current political, economical situation and the beauty of the nature. If I think about the Grand Savannah and the Canaima National Park, where I took a side trip to see the Angel Falls, it's just amazing. It's one of those places which is stunningly beautiful. It's probably the most beautiful place I've seen in all of this journey. Canaima National Park. It's virgin. It's wild. It's untouched. Oh, to get there, you cannot do it by car. You cannot do it by road. You need to take an expedition by itself. Traveling a day on two rivers. It's that kind of a place. Pure, wild, beautiful. Then you feel that energy of the shamans of the tribes of Venezuela that still are around the area. It's beautiful. But yeah, then from Venezuela, I had to cross into Brazil, because Venezuela doesn't recognize the western half all the way to Essequibo River of Guyana. And therefore, there are no border crossings between Venezuela and Guyana. So you have to go through Brazil, and this is probably one of the best roads I had to cycle through. It's a 400-kilometer road, unasphalted, wild. There's no traffic. There's absolutely no traffic between the Brazilian border and Georgetown. There's nothing. It's a road that starts in a savanna, and then it goes deep for 300 kilometers deep into the Guyanese jungle. And I think it's one of the wildest roads I cycled throughout this entire journey, And it's also one of the least known part of South America. When people think about South America, they never think about the Guyanas. Not really. You think about Peru, you think about Brazil, you think about Colombia, but you never think about the Guyanas, which is exactly why I wanted to get there. But it was also the fact that I wanted to cover every single continental country of the Americas in this journey. So, yeah, that's what brought me all the way to Macapa. And right before reaching Macapa, In Amapá state of Brazil, I was caught into some heavy rains. It was so difficult to advance there. If the rain stops for like 2 hours, that's like, wow, you know? And you do not get a chance to dry any of your clothes. So at some point you run out of clothes and you have to cycle all soaked. You have to sleep all soaked. It was a nightmare. But yeah, I was also in French Guyana. I was also attacked by 3 kids with a gun, you know? This also adds up to the experiences I had along the way. You know, I was in front of a shop that just closed at 9 p.m. trying to catch some Wi-Fi, and then I see myself with these 3 young kids. I mean, they were like 16, 17 max, and they took out a gun and they told me, "Donne-moi tout," in French, you know, give us everything you have. And I got so mad in that moment for them asking me for everything I had. I was like, you guys are arrogant, you know. You don't just ask me for my phone or for something. You want everything from me. So I got so mad. You don't even think about it in that moment. I didn't feel threatened. I felt humiliated or something like that. I mean, I felt like, you know, they're like, yeah, I felt more humiliated than like afraid of the gun. So I tried to hit the guy with a gun. He stepped back, and at the very moment I jumped back on my bike, back on my seat, because I was like kind of like with the bike in between my legs. So I jumped back on the seat and I just ran away, and they followed me for like till we reached like an intersection where there were a lot of other people, and they spread out afterwards. But when I think back at it now, I wasn't afraid of the gun. I was just feeling like, you know, humiliated by it. That's the word. That's probably the word. So I got so mad. I got so mad at them that I wouldn't even think about getting killed, like, or being afraid. So I simply got mad at them showing up a gun and like trying to ask me for everything I had, you know. That was quite an experience as well. Yeah, so that brings us to the Amazon River, where I spent the next 2 months from March of 2017 until May of 2017, when I reached Ecuador, where I had a road to cycle on again. Gotta mention the fact that there is a highway up till from Macapá to Manaus. You could go on a dirt road, but not during the wet season, the rainy season. So, and from Manaus to reach Ecuador, the only way is by boat. There's no more roads afterwards. So I decided to add up another experience in that journey. So I started taking boats from Macapá to Santarém, then on to Manaus, to the triple border between Peru, Colombia, and Brazil, then to Iquitos in Peru, and then onwards to all the way to El Coca in Ecuador. And it's a whole new experience. It's a completely different world. It reminded me of the fact that humanity's first highways were the rivers, you know? People do not travel there by car, by bike, by anything land-wise. They bring in the food by boat. They bring in the construction materials by boat. They do their daily chores, their daily things by boat. They go fishing. They have a completely different lifestyle than we do. Even begging, I've seen how poor kids, beg on the Amazon. They come in small pirogues, in small boats close to the commercial one, which transports passengers. And they get clothes, and people throw money or like goods at them, or like food, you know? So it's amazing to see all that. And it's also amazing to see, as I was going deeper and deeper into Peru's Amazonian region, they would stop in all those indigenous communities that are basically cut off from the rest of the world. They do not have another way to communicate with the world except that weekly or monthly, sometimes boat that reaches them, It's just amazing to see those communities, to see their way of living, to see how they pretty much haven't changed in hundreds of years, And yeah, it was a completely different experience, and that allowed me to connect to the eastern coast of South America, to the western coast again, where I took on to the Andes in Ecuador and Peru.
Before we get to that, what is it like to be on one of these boats? You took 8 boats over 2,200 nautical miles. How long are you on a boat typically? And do you sleep on the boat? Do you eat on the boat? What's that like? What's the experience like?
Yeah, you pretty much sleep and eat there, and you just enjoy the the views of the Amazon and the Amazon jungle. Usually, it took me up to 6 days, 7 days on a boat at times, So you spend the whole week in the same boat with the same people, and you sleep on a hammock. People traveling on those boats, they sleep in hammocks and they eat together, and it's like a small community that builds up for a week, When the boat is full, the hammocks that are hung on the deck look like a spider web. There's so many people traveling together, and it's so crowded at times, but it's also a beautiful experience. I love being close to people, and I love experiencing their way of doing things, their way of traveling. You need to be that kind of a person, because some people would feel intruded into their intimacy in such a small place with so many people. But I love that. I love being close to people, and I love getting a taste of their lives,
Do you have to bring your own food and cook your own food, or are you paying for a ticket that provides you a meal on the boat?
It depends on the boat. They always have food on it, but you usually pay for the meals and the passage, and it's quite cheap. I remember paying from Manaus to Tabatinga, which is on the triple border between Brazil, Peru, and in Colombia, about $100, even less, like $80. You pay for your passage, like a week boat ride, and the food, 3 meals a day. So it's pretty cheap. Yeah. Same thing happened in Peru. Traveling for a week between Iquitos and the border between Peru and Colombia. I paid even less for that. I paid something ridiculously cheap, like $30. And I had a week-long ride and the food, 3 meals a day. It's not the greatest food. I mean, sometimes it looks awful, but you eat it because you don't have a choice, And it's cheap.
After this, you head up into Ecuador, and that place must have impressed you because you spent 4 months there, and you did also, as part of your climbing that you're into, you did 7 climbs there. Tell me a little bit about the experience in Ecuador.
Oh, yeah. Ecuador was amazing. I love that small country. Well, it's not as small, but it's small for South American standards. I love the fact that they're very nature-oriented as a society. They put in laws which started to protect nature. And you see that they keep their country really clean compared to other neighboring countries, especially Peru. In Peru, I was disgusted by how much garbage everybody throws around. As soon as you leave a big city on the coast of Peru, there's like so much garbage and it's stinking. But Ecuador, it was so clean. It was appealing. It was beautiful. You have 10 volcanoes that surpass 5,000 meters of altitude. So you have on one side the Andes, and on the other side you have beautiful beaches on the Pacific. You have Quito, which is it's part of the UNESCO World Heritage. It was one of the first cities to be included, along with Krakow in Poland, to be included in the UNESCO World Heritage list, with all the colonial architecture. And it's cheap, and services are good. I mean, I would eat in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. I would eat a meal for $1.50, which includes a soup, the main dish, and sometimes juice, and even like something sweet, And it was cheap, it was clean, it was nice to be there for a longer period of time. And the people are just so nice. There was a guy I met through couchsurfing in Quito who offered me a hotel room for as long as I needed. There were all these ingredients that made me decide to stay there for longer, having the free accommodation offered by a really nice guy. But also the fact that I wanted to climb these volcanoes. I wanted to change a bit the activity, from cycling to climbing. And I met with 2 Romanian friends with whom I climbed 2 of the highest volcanoes there. We climbed a total of 4 volcanoes over 5,000 meters. But the most impressive climbs were of that of Mount Cayambe, which is 5,000, almost 900 meters high, and that of Chimborazo, which is 6,300 meters high. And they're not easy climbs. I mean, we tried both before actually reaching the top. We did it twice till we reached the top. Because sometimes if you do not know the route and you get caught in a snowstorm, there's no way you're going to reach the top. So the second time always works best because you know what you're dealing with. We did those climbs during nighttime because the ice is so much better. During daytime, being at the equator there, it's the ice starts to melt, and it's really bad for climbing. That's why you start those climbs such as Chimborazo or Cayambe around midnight. You should be on the top around sunrise, maximum at 8 a.m. so that you have enough time to go down and do not let the ice melt, because afterwards it's so much more difficult to go down, and it gets dangerous, But yeah, I added those climbing experiences to my journey, which I'm grateful for. I love seeing the world from different perspectives. I'm not stuck in one activity, I do not want to get stuck into like bike touring, I want to see the world from different perspectives, doing different activities. And that's why I sometimes add up climbs. Now I'm thinking about exploring polar regions, but we'll talk about that later.
After Ecuador, of course, you make your way down into like Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, eventually down into Argentina.
Yes.
At this point, your bike breaks. Your fork breaks off the front of your bike. And so it's been a great bike up into this point, and the fork breaks. How do you manage to get that fixed?
I did not manage to get it fixed. That's the point. I had to ask my sponsors back in Romania to send me a brand new one all the way to Paraguay. And for a month, I was jobless. I had nowhere to go, or actually I could not continue my journey. But I did something else during this time. As I was waiting for my fork to be shipped to Paraguay, I went into Brazil, into Mato Grosso do Sul, and I was for 3 weeks in Campo Grande. I basically took a bus there. The story is interesting because on the day that my fork broke, I had to leave everything I had on the bike with some family in a small rural village in northern Argentina where that happened. My fork actually broke 230 kilometers away from the capital city of Paraguay, Asunción. And the only way I could try to get it fixed was going to Asunción, was the largest city around. So there's no other way. I had to get into Paraguay with my bike. So I left all the panniers, all my clothes except the ones I had on me, and a few others. I put them in a backpack. So I went with the broken bike, hitchhiked to Asunción, and there I was told that I cannot get it fixed. Anyways, I did not get a contact of the people I left my stuff with. So now, after a month, I went back to the village because my idea was to complete this journey solely on a bike. I did not want to take rides or anything else. So I went back to the place where my fork broke and where I left my things with those village people. So I returned a month after receiving my fork, and they were like, "Oh man, if you would have been 1 week late, would have sold your stuff. We're actually thinking about selling everything because we thought you'd never come back. So this is not a little story, you know. But yeah, I did manage in the end to get the fork from the guys in Romania. They sent it to me, and I got it fixed in a shop in Asuncion. Then took a ride back with the fixed bike, got my stuff from the village people, and then I continue my journey back to Asuncion, across Paraguay, then into northern Argentina, Misiones, and then all the way to Uruguay, where I actually met with former President Pepe Mujica. It was quite an interesting experience. I really love the guy, so I really love his way of thinking, his way of living, and I wanted to talk to him about I wanted to meet him and talk to him what happiness means for him, you know. And I'll never forget how I basically shared the mate with him. Mate is like that kind of like, it's not like a tea, it's just yerba mate. It's let's say sort of a tea they drink in Uruguay and Argentina and in southern Brazil, where they call it chimarrão. But it's, you know, again, just like the experience in the jungle, I love those encounters, you know. It's not just a journey of self-discovery, it's a journey of discovering all those other interesting people on this planet, and the sharing of ideas and the sharing of moments with special people. And yeah, I felt really privileged to meet with Jose Mujica. He has a really interesting life story. He was for over 10 years in a prison. There's even like a Netflix movie about him now. But yeah, I love that encounter.
How long did you cycle in Argentina?
Well, Argentina is a big country, and I cycled different parts of Argentina. The most difficult one was definitely the northernmost part, the tropical part of Argentina. It was so damn hot. Like the Salta and Formosa provinces, man. And that was so different from what I was going to see and experiences in Patagonia, because after Montevideo, I took a boat to Buenos Aires, from where I started cycling the whole length of Argentina, all the way to Ushuaia. And Patagonia was a bi-national experience, because I went on a zigzag across Argentina to reach Chile, where I cycled the Carretera Austral, the famous Route 7 of Chile, which is absolutely amazing. You go through all these fjords, mountains, lakes, beautiful blue lakes, and it's just pure nature again. It's wild. Maybe not as wild as the road in Guyana, but it's still very wild. And I remember crossing back into Argentina through the Andes, and it was just a path. You had to cross some rivers on foot. There was no like road linking the two countries. Man, Patagonia again is a wild and beautiful place. I cycle Argentina in a zigzag sort of a way, you know. So first time entering the country was in the northern half, then again in Buenos Aires. No, again from Paraguay I went into Argentina through the Misiones province, and then back into southern Brazil, and then again from Buenos Aires all the way to the Chilean border, close to Bariloche, and then again all the way to Tierra del Fuego, you know, where again you cross into Chile, and then again into Argentina, and then again into Chile. So it's if you want to see the whole length of Patagonia, you need to basically switch in between Chile and Argentina.
What was your emotions like when you reached the end?
Oh, man. I cried. I cried because I thought at some point that Ushuaia was a mythical place. It didn't actually exist, you know? I set out on a 9-month journey, and I ended up with 3 years and 3 months of cycling. So that was quite a journey. And by the time you get there, you almost do not believe that this place actually exists. So when I seen the lights of Ushuaia turning around the corner, I was like, wow, you know, it was that sort of a silence wow moment, and that sort of like a intense happiness, intense sense of victory. I don't know, of man, you managed to do it. You set out for 24,000 kilometers, you end up with a 34,000 kilometers experience, but you make it there, you reach your goal. And maybe it's not that goal that it's so important. It is important for a goal to exist in order to make those experiences happen that you have along the way. I think that's the idea of that goal existing, But it was a moment of self-accomplishment, let's call it this way, a moment of happiness, a moment of intense emotion. Yeah. That was it.
Well, congratulations. You made it.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I understand there's a documentary project. You mentioned that you were filming some of this. What's happening with that documentary?
Yes. All right, so the guy was supposed to do it, the guy who proposed doing it, he quit. But then along the way, after finishing my journey, I still have all my footage. And now I'm planning with the Romanian director to do it for HBO. We don't know yet. He already has 2 films on HBO. He's a documentary making and he's working with HBO, and that's what we're planning at the moment. It's kind of like a long process, but well, we're on it at the moment, and I hope it's gonna be out there one day,
Yeah, that'd be awesome. HBO, that's big time.
Yeah. That's it.
Well, Radu, what's next for you?
I would have told you next would be Greenland, but now with the pandemic, with the worldwide pandemic, I don't know. I'm in New Zealand at the moment. I have no clue yet how am I going to make my way back to Europe, which might be actually an adventure in itself. So, so I could add up another adventure. I don't know how yet, but I could add up an adventure right here, right now, making my own way back to Europe all the way from New Zealand, But to be honest, I'm looking forward to explore some in the near future, some polar regions. I had Greenland crossing of the ice cap scheduled for August, September of this year, but obviously now due to the closure of the borders and the whole craziness that we're going through, it's probably going to get cancelled. I also plan on exploring Antarctica at some point, maybe a South Pole solo, maybe a whole crossing of Antarctica solo. I don't know yet. I want to get into some smaller projects before that, such as Greenland, maybe the Svalbard Islands in Norway and parts of northern Canada. So I'm really looking forward to exploring some polar regions because I know those regions are the most exposed to change. They're not going to be the same in a generation from now. So I want to see them as they are. I want to see them till they're not gone, So polar regions are my next big thing,
What are you doing in New Zealand?
I'm actually in lockdown with my girlfriend. We rented a cottage. I was leading a group of Romanians. We went to hike one of the hardest trails there in New Zealand, the Dusky Trek, in the jungle of southern part of New Zealand in Fiordland National Park. The rest of the group managed to go back home, to go back to Europe, but our flights got canceled and we're supposed to pay a lot of money to get new tickets and we didn't want to do that. So I was like, hey, what the heck, we could just gonna stay here, enjoy a month in a nice rural area of the Northland, and we're gonna see what's next. Maybe we're gonna be here for a few more months to explore some more national parks after they open up the country. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
we're also waiting for things to open up around the world because I'm an adventurer. I also started organizing groups for people. So up till the tourism industry isn't open again, I cannot do much.
Yeah, and if you want to get to Antarctica, well, you're pretty much all the way there. Just hopefully you can take advantage of your location.
I actually thought about it. Christchurch is a good base for Antarctica. It wouldn't be bad, actually. But hey, you never know. I'm open up to anything and everything, so.
Well, Radu, how can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and your adventures?
Definitely on my Instagram account, Radu Păltineanu, or my Facebook page. On Instagram, I usually post it in English. Facebook, rarely. I post it in Romanian, but now there's an automatic translation, so people can see what I mean, can see what I write. So yeah, those two places are the best. And my blog, radupaltineanu.com. I'm working on a bilingual new website at the moment, so they can definitely search for me there.
And in the meantime, they can just use Chrome, and Chrome will automatically translate it to English.
True, yeah, but the new site, the new website is coming up, and it's going to be completely bilingual website, so it's going to be nice. And I'm planning on, I'm actually working on a map, interactive map of my journey across the Americas at the moment for the new website, so it's going to be nice if they look it up.
I'll just spell it. It's RADUPALTINEANU.com.
That's correct.
Okay, Radu Păltineanu, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your adventures of going from the top of Alaska to the bottom of South America via cycle, via boat, via the summit of volcanoes. It's been great to hear the story. Thank you very much.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. I'm now posting on Instagram, so be sure to follow me there. Just search for The Pursuit Zone. This episode was recorded on April 16th, 2020. To send me an email, the address is paul@thepursuitzone.com, or you can leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/thepursuitzone. The best way to support the podcast is to subscribe and share it with your friends. For the subscription links, show notes, and more, visit thepursuitzone.com.